Let's talk about it. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, a podcast where you don't do Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Yeah, sleeping on it for a night did not help things, Grossi. And today we are going to be breaking down the Green Bay Packers' loss to the Philadelphia Eagles in the wild card round with a score of 22-10. And there's a good amount to talk about. And in the coming days, weeks, and months as we head into the offseason, there is going to be plenty of chatter about what the Packers should do next, the state of their current team. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the game itself and kind of the short-term future and what I'm thinking about the Packers going forward. But ultimately, yesterday was a really rough game. And what made it more rough was the fact that the Packers were in the game for a good chunk of it. It was a 6-point game in the third quarter. It was only 10-0 in the first half, and that was despite 3 turnovers in the first half, a total of 4 turnovers by the end of the game, and the Eagles having 0 turnovers. And so it was very frustrating from the offensive perspective. The special teams unit did not play well yesterday, but the defense was the one bright spot of the Packers, and at least that is something that we can hold on to heading into this offseason. But before we get to that, let's talk about just how bad yesterday was. Oh boy, well, heading into this game, the Packers got a bit of a boost in getting some guys back. They got Quay Walker back, which was nice. Evan Williams came back. Of course, they didn't have Christian Watson nor Jair Alexander heading into this game, and it only got worse as the game went on in terms of injuries. By the end of the game, Romeo Doubs was injured. Jaden Reed was injured. Reed, thankfully, coming out this morning saying that he didn't need surgery, which is very good. Josh Myers got rolled up on at the end of the game. Thankfully, he flew back with the team, but that is particularly bad because he was scheduled to be a free agent, so that might wind up costing him. Devontae Wyatt went out in that game and did not return. Elton Jenkins got hurt and did not return. And it just seems like the Packers could not catch a break in terms of injuries. And by the end, Jordan Love really didn't have anybody to throw the ball to, considering his top 3 wide receivers were out of this game. Now, that does not make any excuse for the Packers offense because that offense struggled. And there's a couple reasons as to why. One, Jordan Love did not have a great game whatsoever. Yes, you are going up against the number 1 passing defense in the league. And still, despite all those turnovers, 3 interceptions from Love, they were still in it, which makes this, again, especially heartbreaking. And again, if you don't believe me about how close this game was, you could take a look at the stats. Taking a look here in terms of first downs, Green Bay had 17, Philadelphia had 16. Third down conversions, Packers were actually pretty good. 7 for 13, while Philadelphia was 2 for 11. Yards, 302 for the Packers, 290 for Philadelphia. Yards per play, 5.0 for the Packers and 5.1 for Philadelphia. They each had 2 sacks. Philadelphia had 169 rushing yards, while the Packers had 107. Both sucked in the red zone. The Packers went 1 for 3, while Philadelphia went 1 for 4. Penalties were an absolute killer, and unfortunately, that has been a theme this season. The Packers had 8 penalties for 85 yards, while Philadelphia had 7 for 64. And we know that there could have been even more penalties. But at the end of the day, the major stat and the major difference here was the 4 turnovers compared to 0. And the game started off the worst way possible. Keyshawn Nixon fumbling that ball, even though it looked like Nixon wound up recovering it. The NFL did not agree, and the Packers were down 7-0 very early before the first minute had expired from the first quarter. But let's take a look at the offense, and then we'll get on to the defense. Talking about Jordan Love, it was a very, very rough day for Jordan Love. Went 20 for 33, 212 yards, and had 3 interceptions and was sacked twice. And one of those interceptions, the one to Zach Bond right before the half, Matt LaFleur spoke about it in his post-game press conference, and so did Jordan Love. He said that was just a schematic issue, and Jordan Love just did not see Bound. It was supposed to go to Tucker Kraft on that play, who I believe got chipped, and Zach Bound just came back into the window. Both LaFleur and Jordan Love said that. So unfortunately, that was a schematic thing, and like Jordan Love said, he just did not see Bound. And unfortunately for this offense and for Jordan Love, these last 3 weeks have not been the greatest. Overall, Jordan Love hadn't thrown any interceptions in a good long while. That streak was broken today, obviously, with multiple turnovers. And I know that the discourse about Jordan Love, especially today, is at an all-time low. And I get it. It is very, very frustrating for this quarterback who we have now seen for 2 straight seasons. He's had a lot of ups and downs, and I think the biggest problem has been his consistency. A lot of folks looking at his footwork saying that that has regressed a little bit. Looking at his stats from last year, Jordan Love had 4,159 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. This year, even though he missed a couple games, had 3,389 yards, 25 touchdowns, and still 11 interceptions. And so that is very frustrating because, of course, you want to see Jordan Love remove some of those interceptions interceptions. But at the same time, the criticism is a little bit maddening because what do fans want? And what I mean by that is earlier on the season, they're like, hey, stop being a gunslinger, stop being like Brett Favre and turning the ball over so much and just being haphazard with the ball. And then heading into the playoffs, it was like, you got to be the gunslinger, you got to throw it all the time. And so, yes, I am very frustrated with the interceptions. I do not want Jordan Love to throw interceptions. They are bad. I know, very hot take here. But at the end of the day, his play style has to get more consistent regardless of how he is going to play, whether it's going to be emulating Aaron Rodgers or emulating Brett Favre. I just want Jordan Love to be the best version of himself, and I think we've seen glimpses of that. That's why the Packers gave him $55 million, and I know that's coming under scrutiny now. And listen, if you are one of those people that think that Malik Willis should have started this game, I honestly don't know what to tell you. We are just going to be at a disagreement here. You, of course, are entitled to your opinion. I'm going to disagree. This Malik Willis could not beat the Chicago Bears, and I know they were losing with Jordan Love too, but Malik Willis is not the answer. And we'll talk about Malik Willis in a little bit because that relates to Matt LaFleur, who is under some scrutiny as well. I also think some of these reactions to Jordan Love are a little bit overblown, saying, oh, we would have won with Aaron Rodgers, where I have seen what Aaron Rodgers has done in 2020 and 2021 in those big games, whether it was the NFC Championship game or it was the divisional round against the 49ers, and he did not do much. Did he throw all these interceptions? Absolutely not. But if we want to go and compare to Brett Favre, who threw 6 interceptions one time against the Rams in the playoffs, I think we need to have a little bit of patience as our young QB is developing. If you don't want to have that patience, that is fine by me. You can go and fan your own way. That is just my opinion based on what I've seen. But Jordan Love in his second full season as a starter, there leaves some to be desired. You talk about CJ Stroud, he did not replicate his success that he had in his rookie year, and I'm not trying to compare apples to apples here, but at the end of the day, this is going to take time to develop. And I want to be very clear, I'm not making excuses for Jordan Love. That contract, $55 million, that is the going rate for quarterbacks right now. And the Packers said, hey, we like what we saw, we loved what we saw at the end of the season, we are going to give you this money, we are going to invest in you, we're going to get this out of the way so that we can now build around you. And unfortunately for Jordan Love, he did not have the season that we all expected / anticipated. Instead, he had a bit of a step back. It was not the worst season by far, but this particular game was not good for him. And so as we head into the offseason, in my opinion, there is no QB controversy. However, you do want him to play better as we get into these third and fourth years. These 2 years where you're the youngest NFL team and the second youngest NFL team to make it into the postseason, well, that was a problem because the discipline has been all over the place. But also, you got to give him a little bit of grace here because, again, it is a very young squad. Take a look at our wide receiver core, for example. I spent all offseason saying, hey, we're probably not going to have a wide receiver one because there's going to spread the ball around so much. And yeah, that was true. Tucker Kraft was one of our best receivers this year, and he's a tight end. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to step up. And when you have 3 wide receivers gone by the end of the third quarter, that is going to make things, one, very difficult. But even when everybody was healthy, and there were not many times this season where everybody was healthy, there were still struggles, and that is why they're going to have to go and get a wide receiver at some point, whether it's going to be in free agency or address it in the draft. I don't think it's their number one need, but they're going to have to look at it. And from that point, within the next season or two, if Jordan Love doesn't improve, then we have a very different conversation. But me personally, his second year as a starter, I'm not ready to have any conversations about moving on from Jordan Love. I think it's way too reactionary at this point, but hey, if you want to do a victory lap and say Jordan Love ain't the guy, by all means, go right ahead. Taking a look at a guy who played very well on offense, maybe the guy who played well, it is Josh Jacobs. And Josh Jacobs, what an acquisition for the Packers this year. They went out and got Jacobs, and he finished this game with 18 for 81, had a touchdown, had 107 rushing yards total for the Green Bay Packers offense. But Josh Jacobs played until the final whistle, and of course that run that got all the way down to the goal line was absolutely incredible. Jacobs coming out after the game saying that he's going to try to convince some folks to come on over. Please, Max Crosby, you would look amazing in a Packers uniform. But Jacobs helped the Packers be a top 10 rushing team. They were ranked 5th this year compared to 15th last season. So a huge jump, and Josh Jacobs has been a major reason as to why. Jayden Reed, who left the game with an injury, finished as our leading receiver, 4 for 46, which... yeah, that's going to be tough. And again, I want to be very clear. You are going up against a very good defense, and the Eagles deserve a lot of credit here because their defense was locking things down pretty much the entire game. We talked about special teams. Yes, you have the Nixon fumble early on, but Brandon McManus, of course, missing a field goal as well, which was brutal, especially later on in that game. Ultimately, at the end, it wound up not mattering, but it was pivotal in that moment. And then talking about that defense, Quay Walker led the team in tackles, and they were pretty damn good the entire game. They had one bad drive where Carrington Valdes Valentine just got stiff-armed all the way by Dallas Goedert into the end zone. And besides that one drive, the Packers were able to be in this game regardless of the turnovers, and the defense deserves a lot of credit for that. Jeff Hafley deserves a lot of credit for that. How much credit? Well, Packers fans, if you've been around for a while, you know the Packers have had an abysmal run defense for, I don't know, ever. They were ranked 28th last year in run defense, and this year they were ranked 7th. So we went from one of the worst in the league to a top 10 rushing defense, which is pretty damn good. Now, for our passing defense, last year we were ranked 8th, and the Packers were ranked 13th this year. So a little bit of a regression here, but no Jair Alexander, a litany of injuries. I'm going to be willing to give that a pass, and corner is going to be one of the things that the Packers are going to have to target in this offseason. And as for Philadelphia's offense, they struggled on moving the ball against this Packers defense. Hurts went 13 for 21, 131 yards and 2 touchdowns, was sacked twice. Saquon Barkley, 25 carries for 119 yards. They had a total of 169 rushing yards. And yes, Saquon is going to Saquon. The fact that they held him to 119 yards, honestly, I'm not too upset about it. Devontae Smith was their leading receiver, 4 for 55. So again, even that secondary did a nice job of locking things down. Hell, even A.J. Brown, even though he was reading a book on the sideline, was held to 1 catch for 10 yards. And so if there's anything to be super optimistic about coming into the offseason, it is definitely going to be that defense. Hafley has done a remarkable job. And yes, they still have issues in the pass rush. They need to be able to get after the quarterback. I think edge rusher is going to be one of their top targets in this offseason, whether it's trying to get somebody in free agency, maybe an elite pass rusher, or targeting somebody in the draft. They are going to address that. And like I said, get a corner as well, because we don't know what's going to happen with guys like Jair Alexander or Eric Stokes. But the other person who's under a lot of criticism right now is Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur, especially these last 3 weeks, that offense has gotten off to very slow starts, and unfortunately, they have not been playing well. They did not have the momentum that they did last season heading into the playoffs before they beat the Cowboys. And again, I think the criticism of LaFleur is very valid in terms of his play calling. I think at times it takes a little bit too long to make adjustments. On top of that, if they get punched in the mouth early, it's a little bit difficult for them to overcome those obstacles if they get out of their initial game plan. But overall, I still think Matt LaFleur is a pretty damn good head coach. And while you could look at offensive coordinator, for example, or maybe getting rid of play calling duties for LaFleur and giving it to a more experienced play caller, I still think he is that coach. Why? He's the second fastest coach. He had 100 wins. Under Aaron Rodgers in 2019, they went to the NFC Championship game, but Rodgers did not statistically have his best year. And then the next year when Rodgers bought in, went back-to-back MVP. But maybe you want to make the excuse that Aaron Rodgers, is Aaron Rodgers. Well, hell, they took the youngest team to the playoffs last year. They took the second youngest team to the playoffs this year. And I'm not trying to make excuses, but I just want to make sure that we're not only just talking about the criticism of Matt LaFleur, because he has done some great things for the Packers, but the consistency has been a problem. At times, the play calling has been amazing for guys like Malik Willis in those 2 games, which, by the way, they helped win those games because of Matt LaFleur's play calls to get Malik Willis those wins, his first wins as a starter in the NFL. Hell, they got Malik Willis his first touchdown, and you got to give some credit to Malik Willis because, yes, he is a good football player, and I love the fact that he is a backup, but you can't just say, we're giving all the credit to Malik Willis and none to Matt LaFleur. And I think, unfortunately, we've gotten warped into this sense where if there is criticism about Matt LaFleur or Jordan Love, it's either, hey, it's all or nothing. It's very black and white. I think you should criticize Matt LaFleur and his play calling and his inefficiencies. I think you should criticize Jordan Love and his turnovers and his inconsistencies. But at the end of the day, I think both Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love, I think they've done more good for the Packers than bad. It's just going to be a matter of, okay, can they put it all together and make a run? Because I think the foundation of this team is really damn solid. I know a lot of folks are looking at this season as a down year, even though they won 2 more games this year. They went 1-5 within the division, which is the first time that Matt LaFleur, as the Packers head coach, has had a losing record within the division. On top of that, they lost a total of 7 games. One, of course, yes, to the Chicago Bears, which is infuriating, but they lost to the same 3 teams 2 times. They lost to the Lions twice, the Vikings twice, and the Eagles twice. Oh yeah, and all 3 of those teams are in the postseason. One's the 1 seed, the other's the 2 seed, and the other one has 14 wins. And again, I am not making excuses. I want to be very clear here. But some context here definitely does matter. I don't think the Packers are moving on from Matt LaFleur. They are definitely not moving on from Jordan Love within these next 2 years because his contract alone, and I don't think that they should. I don't think they would be wise to do that. There are people who are doing their victory laps now saying that Jordan Love's a bust or he's not the guy, and that is fine. They can do that. For me, as a Packers fan, and you can fan however you would like to, I'm excited for the future of this team. Yesterday was a really, really crappy day. Hell, that was the last Packers game that I'm going to be watching in this house. You think I wanted to watch that garbage and say, oh yeah, that's how I want to send this house out. This is the last game for the Packers I want to watch in this house. Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, and I'm not ready to turn the page completely, the future of this team is super duper exciting. They have $62 million of cap this upcoming season. They have some free agents that they might wind up re-signing for their team, but ultimately they can be really aggressive in free agency and the draft if they choose to. And considering Goody hit a home run on Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs this past offseason, the Packers are finally going to have the capital and cap space to do what they want and be aggressive in those areas to make this team even more ready for the postseason. And listen, the Packers are obviously not a perfect team whatsoever, but considering they went toe-to-toe with the number 2 seed and the Eagles are a very good football team this year, I do feel pretty confident going forward. It was still heartbreaking yesterday. I am not happy that they lost in any way, shape, or form, and I understand all the negativity that's coming out of it because as a Packers fan, the bar is set extremely high. Hell, the Steelers are going through the same exact thing with Mike Tomlin right now, right? In which they haven't won a playoff game. They are 0-6 in their last playoff games, and they're talking about getting rid of Mike Tomlin, who objectively I think is a very good head coach. Here, Jordan Love is a young quarterback in his second full season as a starter, and these next 2 years are really going to determine what kind of player Jordan Love is. And hey, all the haters, you might be right. And if in 2 years we're talking about Jordan Love and he hasn't played well, guess what? I will be the first person to say, you were right. Give yourself a pat on the back. Congratulations. Me, looking at Jordan Love and how he's played these last 2 years, I think that contract is warranted just because that is what the market is dictating. And if you are a Packers fan who watched the end of last season, you saw the potential in Jordan Love. And same exact thing with Matt LaFleur. I think overall he's a very good coach who does have some inefficiencies. I hope those get rectified, and maybe those can be rectified by getting a new offensive coordinator or removing play calling duties, but he does have to get better objectively, especially in those big games and in those big moments. And depending on what the Packers decide to do in this offseason as they continue to try and get to a Super Bowl with now a lot of cap space, that is going to determine where Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love are going to rank in the halls of Packers fandom and history. But in my opinion, I need to wait it out a little bit longer before I'm saying fire anybody. I don't think Jordan Love is an awful quarterback. I don't think Matt LaFleur is a bad coach. I think that both of them are still growing. They're both very young. And while Matt LaFleur, I give him a little less leeway because he's been with the Packers a little bit longer, he's done some great things for the organization. And Jordan Love, I am very much on a wait and see basis. However, I think his arrow is pointing up. If I'm wrong, I will be the first one to admit it. Yesterday was a very bad game for Jordan Love and a little bit of a disappointing season compared to last year. But I still think the future of this team is very bright, and hopefully we'll be right back in this spot with a better result next year. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. How do you feel about yesterday's game? Eagles fans, they're moving on to the divisional round. They'll be playing either the Vikings or the Rams. We shall wait and see. But unfortunately, the Packers season is over, and now it's on to the offseason. But let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy, all social media see down below. A big shout out and thank you to all the YouTube and Patreon members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.